Hi everyone. I thought I'd take a few minutes to just talk to you about the upcoming assignment in Module 2, writing a statement of the research problem. You'll find that all of what I'm going to be talking about on Submit Your Assignment. There's the description of the assignment as well as the rubric. So let's talk through some of the issues related to this assignment, and hopefully that will answer some of your questions. And certainly if you have any further questions, let me know by email or whatever means you choose, and we can talk those through. Okay, so the purpose of the assignment is to learn more about the key first step in conducting research, that is identifying the research problem. Now that might seem like a simple thing, and some of you may have already decided quite early on in this whole process exactly what you want to do. Others have some kind of nebulous idea, but really haven't come to any kind of conclusion. So students come to this course and certainly to this assignment at all different stages of this process. But the important thing to recognize is that it is a process. It's not something you just kind of say, this is what I'm going to do. For anyone that I've talked to, any of the graduate students that I've worked with and so on, it really is a coming to the research problem. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But for each one, it's a particular kind of journey. So this assignment is meant to kind of mimic that journey in a certain sense, or to provide the steps for that journey so that you can work through them and come to some kind of an idea of what you might want to do. That doesn't mean this is what you will actually do in the end for your research project, but nevertheless, it will give you an opportunity to work through the steps. Okay. So first of all, a little bit of advice about this whole process. One of them being that what you decide to do needs to be doable within your resources. Time being one of your resources, economic resources are important. If you decide to fly somewhere exotic to do your research, well, unless you've got some kind of grant or something, you're going to have to foot the bill. So that's something that every researcher has to think about. There might be technological resources that are required, and you would need to find out whether you have access to those technological resources and those kinds of things. You need to ask yourself, is this important to the educational community, to my educational community, to my school, to my classroom, to my parent association in the school, to my principal and the activities that they are engaged in or I'm engaged in as an administrator in the school? Is it justifiable both ethically and in terms of filling a gap in the scholarly literature? Now, it doesn't mean that this is something that you're doing that is totally unique. It's never been done before. It means that within a certain body of exploration or research, there's a niche or there's a small spot that you can supply some information. So there might be a great deal of information about a particular issue, but you're going to be able to provide a very particular contextual analysis that will be related to your own context or a context that you choose that hasn't been done before. So in that way, it contributes to the scholarly literature, and there are a variety of ways. So, so you can think that through. And is it contributing to educational practices? And of course, that's important because that's why we're here, to learn how to provide the kind of research background to be able to answer some of the questions that we have about our own practices and the practices of those we care about in our educational community. And I've already talked about this one, except that you'll need to think this through in terms of the discussion in Chapter 2 in Creswell and Guterman. It says Creswell here, but it's short form for Creswell and Guterman. So that's going to be something that you're going to be able to go back to from Module 1. And in terms of the process, first of all, you'll perhaps think of 2 or 3 research problems that are of interest to you. You may want to discuss them with trusted colleagues, mentors, friends, family, your spouse, etc., to determine the kind of interest that there is in the educational community, or perhaps in the community itself around that educational entity, the school or whatever, about a particular problem that you're interested in, or a series of problems that you're interested in. And you might want to kind of feel out within that discussion whether there's greater interest in one than the other. One is seen more useful than the other, or so on. And that will help you come to your decision. May not predict your decision, but it will help you think that through. Once you've considered the following criteria, this is the second part of this coming to the research problem, you're going to choose one of the research areas of interest that you've identified. So first of all, you're going to do the first part where you're thinking about 2 or 3 or 5, however many you are interested in. And then you're going to look them through, considering the resources necessary to research the problem you've chosen, whether studying this problem would make a significant contribution to existing literature, and so on, which we've already discussed. And lastly, what research approach is likely best in approaching this research problem? Now, at this point in the course, you may say, well, I'm not quite sure. But nevertheless, at this point, you may be thinking, well, but I think I'm going to approach this probably qualitatively, maybe quantitatively. That is, I'm going to do it through interviews, focus groups, photographic interviews, those sorts of things, which is the qualitative kinds of approaches that people can use. Or I'm going to do a statistical analysis of some kind through a survey or whatever, and that would be a quantitative research approach. Or I'm going to do both. Now, realistically, given the time that you have available to you for this, for what you're going to do in this program, our mixed methods is much more time consuming because you're actually doing, in a sense, 2 research projects and then comparing and contrasting the results and finding a depth of analysis through doing that. You may not have the time for that, but nevertheless, that's one of the approaches that you potentially could use. So you're going to think about how, what kind of research approach you're going to be using. And then after completing all of this preliminary work, you're then going to write a statement of the problem. Now, I should add here that while you're doing this preliminary work, you're probably going to be, well, you will need to look at the literature around the problem that you've identified as an area that you would like to explore. So what does the literature actually say about this already? And that helps you make a decision about how you can approach this problem then with a somewhat unique perspective or a unique context that's going to add to the literature. And that sort of thing. So in order to be able to answer these questions, you're going to have to look at the literature to be able to respond knowledgeably. And then what research approach is likely best and so on is going to be something that we'll look at in more detail as the course goes along, but you'll be able to make some general statements about it at this point. And some of you may be able to do more than that. And then having completed the preliminary work above, then you're going to write your statement of the problem paper. Now, what I mean by that is that there are several steps to this. The actual coming to the research problem is probably, well, it is an important part of what you discuss in your paper. You're probably going to give a couple of paragraphs to it, probably no more than that, but a description of how you actually worked through this is something that's worthwhile to do. And then having done that, you're going to use pages 64 to 75 in Creswell and Guterman as a guide for constructing, your statement of the problem. So your paper needs to include the following, and these might be headings that you would use, or at least kind of topical areas that you would use. Your general topic, your research problem, the justification for the research problem, why it is that this is an important thing to do, the deficiencies in the evidence that may be obvious in the literature around this particular topic, and then relating the discussion to the audiences that you hope to reach with this research. And that's all described in Creswell and Guterman, pages 64 to 75. So you can use that as your guide in constructing your paper. And you're, of course, welcome to use literature from Edu 510. Creswell and Guterman will no doubt be one, but there may be other papers as well that will be useful to you, or papers from other courses that you've taken. And then you will then draw on any peer-reviewed academic journals that you've looked at as you've kind of come to your problem and as you've worked your way through what it is that you're going to be looking at. And it's important that they be peer-reviewed academic journals or academic resources that are supporting your statement of the problem. You can use references from professional journals. It's not necessary, but they should be limited to no more than one or two. So for example, you might use the professional literature to talk about the educational community having spoken about the need for more work in this area, or that this is an issue for teachers in schools and that sort of thing. And of course, excellent use of the APA 6th edition for your citations and references will be expected. Now, of course, we're in the kind of intergenerational space between the 6th edition and the 7th edition. So, but this group will be using the 6th edition, and I imagine by now you're quite familiar with it, and you either have the book or you have the resources that are necessary to be able to use it with expertise. So then the rubric is going to give you a few marks for coming to your discussion about coming to the research problem, and the kinds of things that I'm looking for are here. The statement of the problem, of course, is the most important part of, in many ways, of this paper. And it will include all of the elements that are described in part 3 that I talked about above. And then your references and citations are going to be well supported, or rather your paper is going to be well supported with references and citations from appropriate literature that's cited and referenced correctly using the conventions of APA 6th edition. Now, when I'm marking this paper, when I'm marking any paper that you do, you'll find that I probably do, if necessary, some editing, or I may make some suggestions or ask some questions about why is it that you said it this way, or why is it that you felt that this was important, or whatever. The reason I do that is not to be judgmental. I'm not trying to, when we write, it's kind of our heart on our sleeve. So I'm not trying to be cruel in any way, but really what I'm trying to be is helpful editorially in a sense. I'll also in the comments give you suggestions for anything that might, it doesn't necessarily have to be, but might be helpful in the kind of academic writing that you're going to be doing from this, certainly from this point on, and have been doing up until now, in terms of your research project and so on, and the kinds of things that are necessary for you to be thinking about to really do a great job. This is this kind of work is text heavy, and that means that writing is central to communicating the important ideas that you're exploring. And so some of us have had lots more background in that than others. So I'm trying to support you in the work that you're doing, and I can't do that face to face so easily. So I do it this way. So I hope that you'll take any comments that I make or any of the edits that I make with that spirit in mind. And if you have any questions or concerns about anything that I might write or anything like that, please talk to me about it so that we can work that through as a part of your growing writerly practice as an academic researcher. That's all I want to say, and I've talked longer than I intended to, but I hope that this is helpful. And if you have any questions at all about this assignment after I've gone through this and you've watched the video and after you've looked at the rubric and so on, and that may raise some questions for you, then please feel free to ask, and I'm more than happy to talk to you about them. That's why I'm here. So, and that's part of what I think is really important in the context of this course. So please feel free to get in touch at any time. With that, take care, and I hope that this is helpful, and all the best with the assignment.